I don't remember which one it was, but that same day they announced they were moving up to get funding for Mars.
Yeah.
So they were already going to cut all
That's
that.
why I was questioning Lindley. I said, well, we got an announcement today, didn't we?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I don't know how much overlap there is between the budget for going to Mars and the budget for this sort of thing, but I suspect that it's probably some.
They want to cut one and put it in someplace else.
Yeah, to me, it's just like, I don't really know what to say to that.
It was interesting, I mean, to read the reasons why they gave.
Yeah.
It was pretty honest.
Yeah,
Well, just an announcement, a reminder from the treasurer that specifically is for people who might be viewing online that 2025 memberships will go through the end of this month.
and I'm going to do another round of trying to get people's attention, but so far that doesn't work as effectively as I
We'll
hope.
pick up on the station last time.
Well, I hope there's a little causation there.
I got one that I think may come back. So we'll see. We'll work good.
Good. Any other announcements? Any other news? Anything that?
I don't know, a thought today. I was looking in. You wanted to try and get younger people in here.
Yeah.
The Boy Scouts have a strong merit badge. Could we? And I got the requirements here. I don't have the knowledge to put on it, but I'm more than willing to learn how to do it. Or get some younger people here. I have just a thought.
I have no idea if there have been any instances in the past where we've worked with,
Yes.
and did it not go well, or did it go well?
Well, it's just left behind, except that it doesn't, it's a one-shot thing.
Yeah.
They don't come back the next year, because they get your Asami badge, they're done.
Yeah.
Well, I thought, at least introduce them to us. We might get one once in a while.
Yeah, it seems like, it's, like you said, there's always a chance that you can get at least one person interested in something.
Where did we get rid of that notice come from? It was Boy Scouts or something?
Oh, no, well, I typed in the requirements for Boy Scout astronomy merit badge.
Because I don't
This
know
all
where
came
that.
out, and then at the end it sends you to these folks.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Oh,
And
right.
I don't know, but obviously they're not.
Not all.
I think it might be worth looking into, certainly, but it's kind of a volume business, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so,
Yeah.
might be worth it.
We could find out the requirements online so that we could get off. Because I know we worked with them before, we worked with Girl Scouts before, and all that kind of stuff. And we just have to notify the council again
Yeah.
that we're around.
Yeah.
So, a couple other things, I guess, everybody knows that the general meeting is today, because you're here. We have a public night, April the 11th. That will be, then we have a backup date on that, so that is a Saturday, right? That's a week from Saturday. And then, next general meeting is April 23rd. I don't have a speaker lined up for that. David was originally going to be the speaker for that, and he graciously agreed to move his date forward a month. So, anybody wants to volunteer, the volunteer line is always available.
Contact with people might be.
I actually got in touch with him about some other stuff, and that's a good idea, naturally. Just a few general things. Do we want to turn off a set of lights just so people can see the screen a little bit better? I don't know how well that works in this room, but next week after next is Dark Sky, annual Dark Sky, International Dark Sky Week. there are petitions and things that you can sign. This is a particularly bad time for that right now because of that mirror crap that they're talking about. I mean, there was a public outreach or a public discussion period for that. I don't know if any of you responded to that. I sent in my name and said, please don't do this. It's a terrible idea. That company has now issued a statement saying that they're working with the astronomical community.
Yeah.
I personally, and I just look at the pictures of these guys and it's just like these Christians. So anyway, but yeah, it is stuff kind of weird. So think about gardens. You can go to this site, by the way, and it will. There are petitions and things you can sign. I don't know how valuable they are, but it certainly doesn't hurt to put your name on them. Also, another thing on April 11th is this event, which Rick is going to be there with a table, and he's going to have some of his meteorites available, I guess. So I was thinking, I know we've done some stuff with this in the past. It's been kind of mixed success, basically. So I know we haven't done anything in the last couple of years, but I thought I might pop over because I'm not sure I actually met Rick. Maybe I've met him slightly.
So we also mentioned about possibly getting him for anything that we might do in conjunction with Fastwood.
Which is one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of go introduce myself to him, because I approached that possibility and he kind of seemed like, that sounds like an interesting idea. But he mentioned he has kind of volunteered that he might be able to provide some meteorites, which I think would be nice. It's a nice display. So apparently he said he has I can't remember how he put it. It sounded modest, but it sounded modest in a way that's like, no, I got a lot.
If you consider filling out the table over a lot.
Yeah. So anyway, if this is next week from Saturday, 2 weeks from Saturday, and I don't know, I might pop over here because it just sounds. I think the AAL has a table here. Are they planning on something? I think we're anyway. So possibilities, I guess. A couple of other news items that kind of caught my eye. The Artemis 2 booster is now almost back. No, it's back on the pad now, so it's back in launch position. They rolled it back because it has fuel leaks. Now they rolled it back out there, and it is ready to launch. The revised launch date is April 1st, which I do understand the mathematics of all the launch window stuff, but why exactly it ends up being on April Fool's Day is one of those nice yeah. Anyway, so we'll cross our fingers. I'm planning to, we start to watch this particular launch. And this is a mission that will not orbit the moon, but it'll go in a big loop around it, basically. And somebody mentioned that the whole Artemis program has been sort of reorganized. It's not quite the right word. The planning has been revised. So now they're starting, they want to get rid of the, this is like sort of bordering on science fiction. They want to get rid of the proposed orbital space station around the moon, which I never quite understood the purpose of. And now they want to build a base on the moon, which I think not a bad idea. Going to be technically really, really tough to do for a variety of reasons. And then go to Mars, which is going to be super technically difficult, but anyway, so the revisions of the mission plan mean that the whole Artemis project will kind of change its focus a little bit. It also means the next manned lunar landing or crewed lunar landing may not happen in the timeline that was originally proposed.
Okay.
Anyway, so that was kind of a new thing. This is something I thought was kind of cool. This is actually one of these CubeSats. These are tiny, tiny little satellites that are basically designed for one very specific mission. This one was called SPARKS, which I looked up what SPARKS stood for, and I can't remember anymore, but it's basically to look at a selected group of exoplanets for details of habitability. This one works in the ultraviolet part of the spectrum, the part that's just too short to see with your eye. and they're looking at a series, and they finally, this has been in the works now quite a while, and they finally are now returning imagery on this. So the first images came back in early part of February for the sparks. There's what it looks like in the faction armor. This is it actually in the cold. When I first looked at this, I thought, is that a battery or something? No, that's it. This is the sparks thing right there. And so this is what it looks like when it folds out. But these little CubeSats are kind of almost off-the-shelf technology that you can change for various things. And I think that they need one of these that where it operates in the ultraviolet. It's going to look for solar system things. And what particularly they need to be able to do is point it back toward the sun and see if they can finally find the elusive Vulcan white asteroids, which people have been speculating about for, I don't know, hundreds of years now. Nobody's been able to find one. So I think if you look in the ultraviolet, you might be able to cheat some of the sun problems and also, I don't know, if I were stupid enough to want to propose this, I would, but I'm pretty sure I'd get laughed at. I would like to see some of it. Right. So anyway, so this thing's up in orbit now, which is I think pretty interesting. It's actually being controlled by students at Arizona State. So these are super cheap. They want these things for $30 million. Sounds like a lot of money, right? But in aerospace, it is a drop in the bucket, basically. Weird piece of news here. There was an observation of apparently two exoplanets colliding. This was actually a targeted, not exactly a targeted off. This was an opportunistic discovery. Some graduate student was looking through their data and noticed this strange appearance and concluded that this must be a collision between exoplanets. I kind of noted what the graduate student's name was. I've since forgot. All I can think of is that particular graduate student for the rest of their life is going to be able to basically dine out on this discovery right here. You know, so this is the sort of thing that if it falls in your lap as a graduate student, then life has treated you with a very nice little surprise. I think it would be very interesting to be able to observe from a distance planets colliding, because that's one of the mechanisms that is thought resulted in the moon, right? The proto-Earth and the proto-whatever era smashed together, and the moon is, and the Earth are kind of the reformed bits of it. These sound like they're a little bit more mature objects than that. It was really interesting. And finally, you probably heard a little bit about this, the Ohio fireball, but actually it's the Ohio fireballs. And in the last week, this particular one was from March the 19th, so this was right after the first one. There's a view of it right there. This is from a GOES weather satellite, and it was actually able to capture this thing in the atmosphere over there in northern Ohio. There's a view of it from the ground. There was another one in Ohio later in the week, and then there was one in Texas, and over the last week, there's been, I believe, 5. Is anybody else? Yeah. And they've been in various places. Big talk that I've been seeing is how are these related? Are they kind of causal link between them?
There's statistically, there's a higher number of fireballs at the vernal equinox.
Yeah.
They don't know why that's the case, but they're thinking maybe there's just some concentration of large debris in the vicinity of the Earth's orbit
During that time? Anyway.
But the cause of that, the heightened, the elevated currents is not well.
I wonder if they are related objects. Like if you analyze them, are they all the same?
They're coming from
different areas.
ones that were observed the last couple of weeks were coming from different directions.
I listened to a podcast, or a YouTube broadcast of a meeting of the Astronomical Society of the Philippines. I think it was last weekend. They did they had a speaker from Astronomy Magazine, and he was talking about these. And one of the people that, in their question and answer period, they were talking about this, and one of the people that contacted them, not sent a message, was Jeffrey Knockin. who, if you remember the show Meteoring Men that was on TV like 20 odd years ago, him and this buddy of his, Jeff Arnold, would go out and search for, it was kind of a cool show. I used to really like watching it. But he said that his former searching partner is on the ground in Ohio, and they're finding little bits of this thing, so parts of it did actually make it to the ground.
The fireball over Texas actually dropped a piece through somebody's rough.
Yeah, that happens every once in a while. There was a kind of famous case back in the 50s or early 60s where a big chunk of stuff, this was in Alabama, came through the roof of this woman's house and hit her, and actually bounced off her radio and then hit her, and it left a bruise on her thigh. That big. Yeah, yeah. And she's in history that we know the only person that has ever been hit by it, and at least in U.S. history, has ever been hit by a meteor. And she was in her house taking a nap when it happened.
Does that anybody remember the 1994 Peekskill, New York meteor?
Is that the one that went and ended up in somebody's trunk?
Yes, the
Yeah.
one that
Oh, yeah.
landed on one through the trunk.
There was
of the
one.
car.
There was one in Johnstown, Colorado, probably in the '60s, which is not too far from where I grew up. We actually, when I was in junior high, we played Johnstown Junior High in sporting events, and they had a meteor fall there that actually destroyed this guy's mailbox. So there's a picture of this mailbox that has been blasted by this little.
That car that was hit in New York, the owner of the car sold it to a meteorite collector for $70,000. And the car makes the Gem and Mineral Show tour. They take it to they were taken to the Gem and Mineral shows throughout the country.
Yeah. That's interesting. So anyway, there was this flurry of fireballs, and people are speculating on the reasons. And I don't know. I guess kind of stay tuned a little bit, but yeah, you can see there's. I've never actually seen it daytime. I've seen nighttime ones, but I've never seen one. Interesting little guy. All right, so kind of a segue there. Somebody mentioned the equinox. So I got to say, I usually try to do a little, pre-presentation warm-up, I guess, and usually it's something to do with a constellation. But today, I don't know if y'all know this or not, but today's Open Day, which, as far as I'm concerned, should be a national holiday. And so I was desperately trying to come up with some way to connect baseball and astronomy, and just could not do it. Other than the fact that there's a baseball team called the Astros, which is not really named after astronomy, it's named after astronauts, as far as I know. But anyway, so I gave up on that and decided to kind of circle back to something else, which is that it's also almost the beginning of spring. So the first day of spring was not too long ago. So it is now springtime. And so I thought I'd just talk a little bit about what that means, which again, most of you probably already know this stuff. Spring to a lot of people's minds, spring means beautiful flowers bloom and trees start to bud out. To me, it means allergies, and now I got to start mowing the lawn. But I also like the fact that, I like planting flowers, and it's a kind of nice time of year. But astronomically, what is springtime? Well, there's kind of a difference of it between, and again, I kind of preface this by saying, back in the dentist time, I was a climatologist. So I can think in terms of climatological seasons and astronomical seasons, and they don't exactly land on top of each other, and that was something that was always a little bit discordant to me. But basically what astronomical spring, which starts on the time called the vernal equinox, which this year was on March the 20th, but doesn't necessarily always fall on the same day, partially because, the orbital system of the Earth and the Sun is not just the Earth and the Sun. There's all sorts of stuff out there, too, and they all have gravity and things around. So that means that while the orbit is predictable up to a point, it's not predictable ad infinitum, and it also doesn't kind of stay the same. So what it basically means is we're moving into meteorological and astronomical spring. Astronomical spring starts on March the 20th. I grew up in an area where March the 20th was definitely still winter. The heaviest snow I can ever remember having in my hometown was on May the 3rd, and it snowed 4.5 feet. So, you know, we've always thought about that as, oh, it's still winter time. It's going to be winter time until about June the 6th, basically. But it's still, in astronomical terms, it's spring. So basically what's kind of happening, right, is as the sun makes its way, and again, I'm kind of ignoring the fact that it's not the sun that's moving, it's the Earth that's moving, but as the apparent position of the sun moves through time, it's now moving into the part of the sky that we would associate with astronomical spring. This is what it looks like in the northern hemisphere. Going to the southern hemisphere is all messed up, right? Both the meteorological and astronomical seasons, they fall at the wrong time of the year, at least from our northern hemisphere perspective. But what does it actually mean? I mean, what is an equinox? And I think probably we've talked about this before, and probably everybody has a pretty clear idea on this. But as you think about it, as the Earth makes its big orbit around the sun, and of course, it's not a perfectly circular orbit, it's a little bit off, which means that the velocity of the Earth as it moves is faster at certain times, is slower at other times, because Kepler's law means that it kind of has to work that way. But the Earth's rotational axis is also not perpendicular to the path along which it's moving. Right? It's tilted. In fact, the word climate comes from a Greek word klima, with a K, which means inclined or tilted, which kind of tells you something about the relationship between these two things. So all the seasonality that we see is fundamentally attributable to the fact that the Earth's tilted with respect to the plane of the ecliptic about 23.5 degrees, 23.46 degrees, and that changes through time as well. And what that means is there's going to be times of the year when the configuration of the Earth and the Sun are a little different. The angles at which solar radiation is striking the Earth's surface are going to vary a little bit. So if you're going through winter time, the northern hemisphere winter, the northern hemisphere is kind of tilted away, which means that as the sun or radiation rise spread out, it's more diffuse, more spread out over a larger area. The energy per unit of area is less. Not as much capacity to heat up, cooler, right? Sometimes sort of the opposite, right? And the equinoxes are kind of the points halfway in between. And if you want to think about it in terms of geometry, now the Earth's rotational axis is perpendicular to the sun striking the Earth at a particular time. And the day of the equinox is the day that when that solar and when the sun reaches the highest point in the sky. Number one, it's directly overhead, which is weird if you've ever been on the equator, because you look, but it also means that the solar radiation is striking at a right angle. I don't know if you ever studied radiation, there's this thing called Beer's law, right, which basically says as that angle gets bigger, the energy per unit area gets smaller, right? And so in this particular case, it's a concentrated stream of energy. But and that occurs at the equator on the days of the equinoxes. So both equinoxes are configured the same way. We're in the March of vernal equinox, so here are just basically passes. So we're now headed into the summer. Right? So here's actually, I thought this was really interesting. This was the actual position of the subsolar point at the moment of the equinox, which was March the 20th. That was what last Monday, at 2:46 p.m. Universal time. So that's where the sun was relative to right on the equator, right? Equator was right to there, and kind of out over the Pacific, basically. And this is an interesting shot. This is actually an image from the GOES satellite. GOES are the weather satellites that, and other things, but there's 5 or 6 of them around there. So this was the GOES image that was actually acquired in 2022 on the day of vernal equinox. And look at that. There's the pole right there, right? There's a beautiful little cyclone out here. But there's South America right there. And you can see that the illuminated half of the Earth and non-illuminated half of the Earth are split more or less in half, right? And passing right through the poles. So the South Pole, the North Pole, all lined up with this terminator right here, this axis of division between the dark half kind of a visual representation of what the configuration of the Earth is. So these are all very Earth-related definitions of the equinox, but there's also kind of a way of thinking about it from an astronomical perspective, and this is something I think comes into play sometimes when you're imaging or thinking about the position of things in the sky. And from an astronomical perspective, the definition then of an equinox is it's the point when the apparent position of the sun crosses the plane of the ecliptic, right? So there's the celestial where if you extend the Earth out in space, right, that's that circle. There's the ecliptic. Actually, this is a little misleading diagram. It should be tilted, right, in my opinion, so that the ecliptic looks flat and the celestial equator looks tilted, but anyway. But then the vernal equinox is when the sun goes to what's called the first point of Aries, which is where these two things cross, right? And then the autumnal equinox is the first point of Libra, 6 months later. The first point of Aries is not deceptively named, but it's no longer in Aries anymore. It was named by Ptolemy, and I was making a mental note to look up and see when Ptolemy was around and did this.
2nd century.
2nd century BC, right?
A.
A. So,
He was the
so it's been about 2,000
almost 2,000 years.
And so apparently that's enough time. Why this varies is because of that's what's called precessional motion, which means that looks, if you could watch it, it looks like a top kind of wobbling, which also is one of the reasons why the celestial North Pole is not going to be the celestial North Pole forever, right? It's not always going to point towards Polaris. But anyway, so now the first point of Aries is actually in Pisces. So here's Aries over here. I kind of wonder if maybe the constellations were a little different in those days too. But anyway, it's been enough time that now the apparent position has shifted from somewhere over here to somewhere over here. But anyway, the other thing that's kind of important about the first point of Aries is it's the origin point for the system of right ascension and declination. It's like 0, 0 in that system, right? So all right ascensions and declinations are relative to this first point of Aries. It's kind of like, if you want to make an analogy to the terrestrial coordinate system, it would be like the prime meridian and the equator cross into each other. So anyway, and so there's, again, just kind of a more three-dimensional view of the first point of Aries is the origin point for the celestial coordinate system. So anyway, I just kind of thought I'd throw that out there largely because I was desperately trying to think of something to talk about, and unfortunately baseball didn't work. All right, so what kind of stuff can you actually see in spring? One of the things about the period we're heading into is it's really good for like deep sky objects, right? Because it's now that we're kind of coming around to face essentially a different portion of the sky. We're no longer looking, at least at nighttime, back towards the core of the galaxy quite so much, so there's not as much dust and stuff like that, which would kind of obscure things. It's also not quite as many stars, which I was noticing the other night when I was doing NEO stuff. It was easier a little bit to kind of find my way around. Because, you're not looking through these incredibly populated star fields.
And galaxy season is just about ready to start.
And galaxy season is part of this, right? So here's some of the, and these are just pictures that people have posted online. I was actually listening to a podcast on the way over here that's about astrophotography, and they're talking about galaxy season and some of the nice galaxies that are available. I guess the Leo triplet is a common target for all this. So if you're wanting to do galaxies, and now's the time. All right. And by the way, as I was kind of shuttling around looking for stuff to fill in a little time here, I ran across this Hubble Night Sky 80 Challenge, which is a galaxy season thing where you can kind of compare your photos to Hubble photos of these objects. I actually have a link on this, which apparently died somewhere, so I can connect to the website where this is. But if you're interested in this, let me know. I'll send you the website. I think I've seen
It's gonna be a
that.
great target if you're interested in that kind of stuff.
I think I've remember seeing a picture of that, and they were talking about the fact that even though these two things are essentially kind of crossing over each other, the material in it is so dispersed that probably nothing will actually run to. That nothing will.
Yeah, nothing will get to be like, if you look at our sun, you look at, of course, it's like the Proxima Centauri, you shrink the sun down to the size of a basketball, put it in New York City. Proxima Centauri, the line island, so the chances of something getting between those two without getting screwed. The thing that's amazing about it is that the two are so far maintained their structure.
Yeah, the gravity has kind of warped them or started them or something. Yeah. Yeah. Well, apparently coming up pretty soon now will also be nebula season, so we'll move out of galaxy into nebula. So maybe we'll talk about that next week. All right, well, that's it. That's all I kind of had to say about that. So I'll introduce our guest speaker. This is David Kolb, member of our club, and also a member of the he graciously agreed to fill in a little early because, to be honest with you, I got so swamped didn't have any time to. And so the date is still wrong on here. I'm sure that you will correct that, but I'll introduce David. This is what you originally sent me, so I just went ahead and stuck it in here. But
I changed the,
I think it's correct on the version that you sent, so I'll go ahead and
I fixed
that up. And yes, you are correct, but I did. So if you want to, you got you
I've got a
okay,
pointer.
okay, all right. Well,
I'll use that to advance. Okay. I've been collecting books and other things related to astronomy for quite a few years, started when I was in college. And just in the last 20 years, my collecting has really taken off thanks to the internet. Before, the only way to pick things up would be to travel to bookstores around the country as I was traveling, and it was just, I might pick up something once every, maybe once a year. But, now it's like, I can pick up stuff
whenever you want.
whenever I want. Let's see. Maybe I need a little more. Okay, so some of the things I like to collect, if you're interested in collecting, you can collect on specific topics. Or some people like to collect Art Nouveau cards, atlases, or maybe a particular author, maybe signed or inscribed copies, or book plates of well-known individuals. I've done a little bit of all of those. I also like to collect prints from atlases or book plates, constellation cards, stereo cards. This is a print from on the line over here. This would be This is a print from a popular American atlas from the early 19th century by Elijah Burritt. This is a later edition from 1856. And here I have a stereo card that I've collected of the moon. And here's a small constellation card, early 19th century. Also collect periodicals like Sky and Telescope, Sky Magazine. So I've got quite a few of those. They're unfortunately out in the garage, packed away in boxes. Just don't have room for them right now in the house. Also collect ephemera-like postcards, or ephemeruses. Like here's an example: Parker's Ephemeris from 1715 in English. This is an English publication. Also, got trade cards, like cigarette cards. Where I find the stuff, sometimes I find it at yard sales, antique shops, bookstores. Now mostly just online. Rarely get a chance to visit a physical bookstore. Book fairs online or auctions, online auctions. Maybe mostly online, eBay or the major auction houses like Christie's or Sotheby's or Heritage Auctions, Swan Auction Galleries, Trillium Auctions, some of the auction houses that I visit. Most cases I try to strive for the best possible condition. Battered up book is not going to have a whole lot of value when you go try to sell it. So try to get something that's clean, not torn or cracked, has a prototype binding. Now, if a book was normally published with a dust jacket, that's a very desirable thing to have. That's half the value of a book, just the dust jacket alone. And keeping the collection, try to avoid sunlight and fluorescent lights, avoid extremes in temperatures, humidity. I like to keep my books in bookcases with doors, just to keep the dirt off them. Try to keep my prints flat. Use archival quality holders. Avoid stacking books like on the table, because that tends to damage the binding. And then I'll grab the head by the head and tail of the spine. It often just tears out the head and tail of the spine. And repair, not to repair. Never use tape or glue. And in fact, I've only had one book in my collection repaired. I generally leave them in condition I get them. And you want to have a qualified book conservator do any repairs. And the one book that I did have repaired was a copy of a book that was owned by Percival Lowell himself. It was a gift from his mother when he was a teenager. He was like 17 years old. And it was somehow made its way to an online bookseller, and it was in terrible condition. Spine was torn off, the covers were starting to come apart, and ended up having that repaired. A few useful resources for AB, American Book Exchange Books.com, World Catalog. I often consult the World Catalog to determine how common a book is, and try to figure out what edition I have. LiveAuctioneers.com has over 5,000 auction houses. They're basically an umbrella organization for other auction houses. And there's another place called Rare Book Hub. Lists upcoming auctions and a searchable database of past auctions. It requires a subscription for that. Keeping track of all the items. I try to keep track of the purchase price, when I bought it, who I bought it from, its condition, its replacement values. And you can do that, can be done through cloud-based apps such as www.liveib.com or book collection spreadsheet or database. Myself, I have a homegrown database, access database, track the condition, track information about the book itself, information about the author, and it gives me I have a search feature within it, so if I'm looking at a book that I'm thinking of buying, look to see if I already have it first. So that's, and my finding problem is trying to keep up with that, because it does take a lot of time to enter all that information into the database. And the last couple of years, didn't have a whole lot of free time to spend doing that, because My girlfriend is very ill with Alzheimer's, and so, you know, I might be able to buy a book here and there, but just didn't have the time to do the recording. So I've got a little work to catch up on that. Now, getting into what I have in my collection, one of my favorite authors is Percival Lowell. I've got all of his major works, which this is his first book on Mars, and then came out Mars and its Canals. Mars is the Abode of Life, and his last major book, The Evolution of Worlds, in 1909. His books were originally issued with dust jackets. I've never seen a dust jacket on copies for sale. I've seen the dust jackets at the Lowell Observatory. You go to their museum, they have these books on display with the dust jackets. Here are the annals of the Lowell Observatory during the time that Percival Lowell was alive, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And some lesser known works. The Solar System, which is a collection of talks that he gave. Memoirs on the Trans-Neptunian planet. The work that spawned the search for Planet X, which was discovered by Clyde Tombaugh. And Planet Mercury, observations of Planet Mercury. This is Lowell's personal copy of Saturn and its system. This is the book that I had restored. The spine had fallen off, covers were coming loose. There's his booklet. And inscription over here on the right from his mother. Well, at some point when I start disposing of my collection, this book is going to go back to the Lowell Observatory. I think it may have been absconded by one of the staff members in the past. And here's another possible item that came out that belonged to Percival Lowell. It's a little book by Harriet Stowe, the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin. This is called Our Charlie. And in the front fly leaf is Percival Lowell from Nana, Christmas 1862, which would be right about the right time for his childhood. So it's not conclusive, but it's pretty strong. I think there's pretty strong evidence that this may have belonged to Percival Lowell. Here's another book from my collection. This is a rather rare book, The Moon by Richard Proctor from 1873. It has 3 albumen silver prints that were taken by Louis Rutherford in 1870. That when you find copies of this book, you almost never find the silver prints. They are almost always been removed to be framed up and put up on a wall someplace. Bought this book with a whole pile of books from somebody in Australia. I think a lot of these books came out of a club from Melbourne. I talked about this in one of my last talks. The signed copy of Stellar Atmospheres by Celia Payne, 1925. This is you don't find too many copies of this book, particularly signed copies. And there are only about 650 copies printed, or 600 copies printed, that I've seen, I think, maybe one copy come up for sale in the last umpteen years I've been watching. Somebody managed to snag it for like $100, which is pretty good price. Here's an interesting book, Pinpoint Planetarium by Armin Spitz, the creator of these Spitz planetariums. This was a book that was intended to be literally cut to pieces. You could cut out all these little cut all the sections out and make yourself a little put pinholes where the stars are and make yourself a little home planetarium. Another interesting book in my collection is a serial edition of the Story of the Heavens by Sir Robert Ball. In the 19th century, a lot of your books that you would buy were sold in subscription form, particularly like books by Charles Dickens. Most of his novels were sold as a subscription. You would get a chapter every so often, and once you received all the chapters, you take them to the local book binder and have them bound. This is a 1913 serial edition, and what's interesting are all of the advertisements. These serialized books were loaded with ads, and half the fun is just looking at the ads. And for this, you get lots of ads for cocoa and telescopes. This is a kind of another interesting book. This is 1888 edition of Atmosphere by Camille Flammarion. It's not the first edition, it's the fourth edition of that book. But it's the first edition where this famous engraving appears for the very first time. A lot of historians have misidentified this as a like a 15th century engraving. No, it's not. It was done by Camille Flammarion in the 19th century, and he did it for this book right here. The art historians, when they examine the techniques used in this engraving, note that a number of the techniques are 19th century, not the Renaissance, not from the Renaissance. Let's see. Here's one of my favorites. 1574 edition of the Geography by Claudius Ptolemy. This is a wonderful little book. It's about this thick. It's got full of maps. It's not strictly astronomy, but it's by the famous Greek astronomer Ptolemy. And a few of the maps contained within the book. And here's a 1551 edition of Claudius Ptolemy's Almagest. This is his book where he presents the heliocentric universe and his famous star catalog. This book has had a lot of restoration work done to it. It's been rebound in the past, and it's had a number of torn pages repaired. And it's a wonderful little volume. There's the star catalog. This is another one of my favorite books. This is the second edition of Galileo's sunspot observations. This is the 1655 edition. And some of his sketches. This right here is the first star atlas to appear in the Western Hemisphere. And this is a 1552 edition of Del Sfera del Mondo by Piccolomini. The book has a lot of handwritten notes in it. It was originally owned by Jesuit monk, and the notes explain things about some things about the giving of mass.
Have you had any of this notes translated?
No. This is a book I bought through Christie's. They had they explained what the previous, there were two previous monks that had owned the book during the 16th and 17th centuries. And they gave me, they provided that information of the previous owners and what they had written in the book, in the margins. And here's a few of the star charts. Kind of crude, but it's actually fairly common book to find, and they're not that expensive. They're only usually around $1,200 to $1,500 a copy. They're fairly common. I've seen a fair number of them come up for sale. This is a really nice early 19th century atlas by Alexander Jameson from 1820. This is the second edition from 1822. It was a book that was intended as a textbook, and there are numerous exercises throughout the book, but it has some wonderful star charts. It's got some information on ancient constellations. There's a polar constellation chart. Cygnus is Aquarius. Here is Elijah Burritt's atlas. This is the 1835 edition. This is a very common atlas in the early 19th century here in America. It was a relatively inexpensive book at the time, and it was accompanied by a textbook. The atlas went through quite a few editions, beginning with the 1833 first and second editions. Both came out in 1833. This is the third edition from 1835. And the charts are all hand-colored in the first, second, and third editions. Later editions, and in the fourth edition. Elijah Burritt died in 1836, the same year that his last edition came out. After that, other people republished his atlas right up into the 1870s. Overall, there were probably about 300,000 copies printed during that time period from 1833 to 1875. This one is in exceptionally good condition. It's like no one ever used it. Usually, if you find copies of this atlas, they are battered up, they're stained, they are often, the binding has come apart, the charts are loose, and they're torn. They were well loved. They got a lot of use. This one, somebody just put it away and never used it. And I've never seen another copy this clean before, like this, before or since. I almost thought when I first saw it for sale that it was a reproduction, because there are modern reproductions. When I looked more carefully, I could tell it was original. This is another atlas from 1855. This is a British publication from Keith Johnson. It has lots of diagrams of the solar system and other things besides the star charts. Things that explain eclipses and phases. And there's charts that have a blue sky with white stars. This is another thing called a transparent atlas. It's basically cards of the constellations with the stars being punched out so that you just hold it up to the light. And you can see supposedly see the constellation like you would see it at night. And took this picture holding the Big Dipper up to a light. And that's how it appears. And there are actually a fair number of people who publish different atlases similar to this. So they do come up quite fairly, not frequently, but not rarely. They occasionally come up for sale. This is one of my favorites right here. This is Edward Barnard's Atlas of the Milky Way, containing the actual silver prints of the Milky Way that he took. There were about 700 copies printed in 1927 after he died. The actual atlas with photographs is in the larger volume on the left. Second volume it is a series of charts that explain each of the prints. There's a couple more of the prints. And this one is in exceptionally good condition. This was a copy that was, let's see, it was owned by a fairly well-known astronomer by the name of Duncan. He was a astronomer down in Texas, and was now had himself published some textbooks on astronomy in the early 20th century. There are some of the explanatory charts in the second volume. Here's a print. Now I'm getting into some of my prized prints. Here's a print from Urania Matra by Johann Baer from 1603. This was the first really modern-looking atlas of the period from the 17th century that came out after the Epimenides Atlas. And this one, the leaf has, the page has been hand-colored, and you can see lettering bleeding through the backside of the page. That was the hallmark of the first edition. They had printed the explanations in the backside of the charts, which bled through. Nobody liked it. In future editions, all the explanations were on separate pages. So you can always tell first edition by the printing on the back. This is a print from Johann Hevelius's atlas from 1687. Hevelius was the Polish astronomer who did all of his observations visually for his atlas. They were all done with quadrants and sextants and his wife also helped him with compiling the atlas. So this is probably one of the more difficult of the two atlases to find any copies. Actually, I have two pages from his atlas.
You mean like each print was done by hand? Is that what you mean?
The measurements of the stars in the sky, he made all his measurements visually. He didn't use a telescope.
Oh, gotcha.
During the late 17th century, most of the other astronomers were using telescopes. But Hevelius just refused. He stuck with the visual observing. Here is a really nice print called called Planisphere Celeste by Philippe de la Hire, a French astronomer. This was published in 1705. There are actually two, this is just one of the prints. He published two of them, and they were just loose like this. And has any of you been to the Linda Hall Library? You know that big star chart on the wall next to the theater? That's what this is. Reproduction of this. That was hand colored. Their copy was hand colored. This one is in the raw original format. So it's fairly large. It's about like this wide, the sheet. But it's really detailed. Here we have a couple of prints from the André Solaris' catalog. Harmonia Markoznica. This is the second edition from 1708. And this is a southern hemisphere chart, and this is on the right, a diagram illustrating the revolution of the sun around the earth. These charts are very popular among your interior designers. They will buy them for their clients, and they tend to drive the prices of these up. You'll see these hanging in a lot of corporate boardrooms. They're also reproduced a lot. There are a lot of modern reproductions of these charts. In fact, I've had to tell some auction houses that they are not selling the original. What they have is a copy, modern copy.
How do you tell?
You look for the fold in the middle.
Okay.
You also look for the plate marks. There's around the edge, the whole thing is indented. So when they press the copper plate onto the paper, that boundary of that plate leaves a mark around the chart. And you also look at the paper. Is it printed on modern paper, or is it printed on handmade period paper? And you can hold it up the light. You can see the marks from the wire screens that they use to make the paper with. Here are a couple of prints from the Atlas Celestis by Johann Doppelmayr. This is from 1742. These are they're not as popular as the André Solaris charts, but in some cases I find them more appealing. This chart explains the universe according to Tycho Brahe. He believed in a Earth-centered universe with the sun going around the Earth and with other planets going around the sun. And this is a northern hemisphere star chart from the Atlas. So you can see these were original colors. I believe. Now, this is a couple of prints from a fairly rare atlas. This is a print, these are prints from Gematria Britannica by John Bevis from about 1750. John Bevis was an amateur astronomer who was trying to compile a star catalog, an atlas, that had more stars than the atlas that the British astronomer Royal Flamsteed had produced in the early 1700s. He was in the process of getting his atlas printed when his printer went out of business. So they had printed most of the plates, and I believe they were in the process of hand coloring them. And the bankruptcy court seized all the copper plates to offset his debt. And the atlas is his Rhinometria Britannica was never published in his lifetime. In 1771, he fell from a ladder while observing with his telescope and died. Was killed in his fall. And then in 1785, his widow had an auction, a estate sale, where the plates from his atlas were sold off to an unknown buyer, and an unknown buyer a year later, in 1786, started publishing atlases using his charts. The title of the atlas was Atlas Celeste. We don't know we have no idea how many he printed, but there are about 36 known copies that have been accounted for in various collections and libraries around the world, plus an unknown number of plates, loose plates that are out there. Some of these loose plates are from the ones that were just never found, and some were actually taken from some of the atlases that were published in 1786, where the atlases were broken up. These appear to be from an atlas, one or more atlases that were broken up. It's such a rare atlas that the collecting community refers to it as the Ghost Atlas or the Lost Atlas. And each of these plates were dedicated to different individuals. These individuals in the dedications were the subscribers to the atlas. The publication was funded through subscriptions. Of course, none of the subscribers got their atlas in the end. Each of the subscribers would have received a copy of the atlas, but that never happened. Here is a print from John Flamsteed's Atlas Celestis. It's a fairly large, it's 20.5 by 25.5 inches in size. It was criticized as being rather unwieldy because of its large size. This is the second edition, from the second edition of the 1753 edition. The original first edition came out after John Flamsteed's death. His wife and widow published it posthumously in 1729. Now this is a huge print here. This is from Jan Bode's Unigraphia from 1801. This sheet of paper is almost 40 inches across, almost a meter wide. And it is has an amazing amount of detail, far more stars than any previous atlas, and it's the largest physical size, the largest atlas ever published. This is a plate, a loose plate that was never bound. The auction house that I bought this from said that the previous owner was selling off the entire collection of plates for that would be an entire atlas that had never been bound. So more than likely, whoever bought the atlas to begin with just never took it to a bookbinder.
And you bid on individual plates?
I've managed to pick up 4 individual plates. They're really hard to store. I've had to I purchased archival sleeves for movie posters because that's the only thing that they'll fit into. But if you look closely, the number of stars is just amazing. In fact, if you look closely at the plates, when we look at them in person, you can see the nebulae and star clusters indicated on the chart. So it's not just stars, it's also deep sky objects that were known at the time. So a lot of Herschel's NGC objects are indicated on the charts. There's another one. They're absolutely, in this one, in these charts, you can clearly see point boundaries. Now, this particular atlas, the original copper plates still exist. In the 1950s, the East Germans, who owned the held plates, did another run of the atlas. I don't think this is a East German printing, because the paper appears to be much older. It doesn't appear to be modern paper, it appears to be 19th century rag paper. So I'm hoping I bought an original, not an East German copy. But still, even if it's an East German copy, it's from the original copper plates. Another area of my collecting are planispheres. Planispheres, as you some people may not be familiar with the origin of planispheres. Is anybody not familiar with the origin of planispheres, where they came from? They came from the medieval astrolabes. The astrolabes used by during the medieval periods, by like by these Islamic astronomers, had the same features as a modern planisphere, except they were impressed. You use them to tell your time based upon what, by aligning the little sights on the things with certain stars. This is a modern equivalent of an astrolabe. And they were, I think the oldest ones that I've seen, I don't actually own, but I've seen pictures of, go back to like the 18th century. I've seen paper planispheres going back to the 18th century. I imagine they may have existed earlier than that, but survival rate of some of a paper or card planisphere is not going to be very good. And they're not going to survive over long periods like that.
What is this one made of?
This is made out of cardboard. It's a British publication from about 1900. And it works the same as our modern planispheres. Exactly the same thing. Here is something a little different. This is also a planet finder. It's a planisphere allows you to locate the planets. These will look like clock hands, are actually the planet locators. And the planispheres would be sold with a table of the positions of the planets so that you could position the planet for the date in question and then be able to find it in the sky. This is a German planisphere. This is one of my favorites. This is a Czech planisphere from about 1850. It has a beautiful rendition of the Milky Way, and on the backside, a really nice lunar map. And here's a mid-19th century planisphere by Henry Wedball. And it's not in the best of condition, but it's a little bit bigger than most planispheres. probably about this wide, about like that. And you can see the constellations are hand colored. That's one of the nice things about this. And there's a couple of the little pieces of cloth that you could use to grab and move the planisphere around. Now, this is one of my favorite planispheres. This thing is huge, 20 and a half by almost 19 inches in size. This is another Czech planisphere from about 1900. There's a guy in the UK who has published a book about hard planispheres. He's considered the expert on planispheres, around the world's expert. I looked at his book to see if he had this planisphere. He didn't. So I contacted him by email. Said, "Have you ever seen this?" He said, "No, I've never seen it." When we saw the size of it, it's like, wow, this thing's huge. And we kicked this thing around on the Facebook group for vintage astronomy books. And I think we came to the conclusion that this was not just for an individual, this was intended for like a classroom. This is made so large to be used with a group of people. Now, it's not nearly as large as the planisphere that Patrick Moore would use on his TV program back in the 50s and 60s. Have you ever seen the pictures of that planisphere that he had? It was like 8 feet tall. It was huge. It was intended for the TV audience that he would stand in front of and manipulate. Okay, here's some tobacco cards that I collected from about 1960. Lots of little things about constellations and other aspects of astronomy, phases, prominences, and so forth.
Were these something that came in a cigarette pack?
Yes. Postcards. A couple local observatories. There's Scott Observatory, which was burned to the ground in the late 90s over in Parkville, and the Crane Observatory over in Topeka.
I had that postcard.
You do.
Pretty common, yep. Yeah, it's a pretty common postcard. I don't think I've seen too many of the Scott Observatory, but it's such a shame that that arsonists burned that to the ground.
Is it completely structured, completely gone then, or?
It's gone. They burned it to the ground. Antique telescope gone. And stereo news. Morehouse Comet 1910. Meteor in Orion 1910. One of the things that when I was growing up, my dad was into stereo cars, and he actually had one of the stereo cameras in the film. So whenever we'd go on vacation, he'd bring the stereo camera, take pictures of the family on vacation, and would make up stereo cards of our trips. And so we had each of my brothers and my sister, we all had stereo viewers, and we had the cards that my dad made for us. And I ended up over the years collecting the stereo cards as well, and making my own stereo cards.
So these it just looks like the stars are in the background and the comets like up front.
Yep. In fact, you could probably cross your eyes, kind of stare and cross your eyes and get the 3D effect. Try to kind of merge the two together in the middle. And they have to be at just the right distance.
Yeah.
But it works a whole lot better than this, one of the stereo views. And some of the periodicals that I've collected, Sky Magazine, early Sky and Telescope Magazine. I like the one on the right, in that the telescope that is pictured there is the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory 72-inch telescope. I've actually used that stuff. Did some spectroscopy with it. And it's still in use today. It's, in fact, during the COVID period, they made it so that they could do remote access with the telescope, so they don't have to be physically on site. I can remember moving that telescope, 40-ton telescope, trying to maneuver the spectrograph around the pier, because our target was in the northern, was in Draco, and I had to move that, just get that spectrograph around that pier, and the spectrograph was like only a couple inches away from the pier, and it was just taking a little bit of motion at a time. The telescope, the night assistant, was kind of coaching me, making sure I didn't do anything stupid, because that would have been a major disaster to crash into the mount.
That counterweight is crazy.
It's a big counterweight. At the time, this was mid-80s, the telescope was still gravity powered. Had the old gravity clock drive.
So following
Yeah.
And can you imagine trying to adjust that weight to the proper balance?
Oh yeah.
The governor, the weights on the governor were about the size of almost about the size of bowling balls. And it took about half an hour for that clock drive to get up to speed before we could actually observe. Oh, this is my website. I keep a listing of what's in my collection on my personal website, which is sunflower-astronomy.com, and books link on there. And some of the books I have pictures, links to pictures of the books for the prints or whatever.
Cool. Do you use your Access database to generate that? Or,
Yes, it's all scripted in Access Visual Basic for applications to generate that page.
Cool.
So, do you find most of your funds through like dedicate people who are dealers in astronomical books and prints, or are they just more like dealers in books and prints?
Basically, people who deal with books and prints, not specifically astronomy. Well, there is one person that I have bought a fair number of books from. He's retired now, but he's an astronomer at Gettysburg College. He is a fairly, he has a very impressive library, much bigger than mine, and he's in the phase of unloading his library. And over the last 20 years, he's been selling his books for quite a while. He keeps selling. It's like, when you better run out. But most of what I like is from auction houses that specialize like in prints, for the prints, or I buy a lot also on eBay.
Yeah.
Occasionally some nice things come up there, but the really good stuff usually comes out of the major auction houses.
And how many books do you have in your collection?
Pushing 2,000. That would be books and prints and everything else.
What's the most that's have been proved to be entirely inaccurate as well?
No, I don't.
Just like a sort of blip, and this has been included in.
I tend to stay away from that. When I was at Washington State, they would get a lot of letters from people with their bright ideas of how the world they thought should work. And they had a nice collection of silly ideas.
I've gotten a few emails over the years that would fit into that category.
They actually had a
They okay for the students?
they actually had a letter in the collection from an actual patient in a mental hospital.
Yeah. Keeps you on your toes.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was somewhere back in toward the beginning of your presentation, you had some pictures of periodicals, and one of them was Astronomy Magazine, which is this still published?
Yes, it's still published.
That one that you posted was, I was given a subscription to that magazine, I believe, for my 16th birthday, and that issue was the first one I got. Is the one that was, you have a picture in there. I recognize it because it's, it was this, I don't know what it looks like now, but it was this very plain cover. It always had a picture and then the word astronomy.
Yeah, they were very plain to begin
It was
with.
a great magazine. I've not seen a copy of it in years. Is it still?
Yeah, I read that, Sky Telescope, and it's kind of interesting to, they both have articles on the same subject to do some comparison.
Yeah.
Astronomy magazine is perhaps one of the in best health in terms of public, in terms of its readership. It has far more subscribers than Sky Telescope.
That's interesting.
Sky Telescope's coming pretty close to going under.
Stingray was a little bit more, my impression was Sky Telescope was always a little bit more technical.
Yes.
Astronomy was a little bit more general.
Mhm. Sky Telescope, just a few years ago, was bought up by the American Astronomical Society. The parent company was trying to unload it. They were going out of business.
Yeah.
And the magazine was facing a very uncertain future. No one seemed to want to pick it up. The American Astronomical Society came along and picked it up.
I actually, my subscription ran out some time ago and I never really reviewed it. Maybe I should renew it just to keep it. But it had gotten to be really thin. The last edition I got, it was probably up 60 pages or something.
It's gotten a lot thinner.
Yeah.
Because publication costs have gone up an awful lot.
Well, other questions for David? If not, let's thank you. Appreciation once again for willing to take it in.
When I get my house in more of a better order, I'd like to do what I did in the Lawrence Club.
Yeah.
Have a weekend evening open house. Have some stuff out for.
Next time I drive through, I'll have to stalk your house a little bit. Check out the observatory in the backyard.
Drop by. Almost.
I literally drive by about twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. And this morning, in fact, that's when I realized, because you posted something about, a picture of now that we're, enclosing that, and then I looked at it, that's gotta be it. I was starting to wonder, because it seemed like what you were describing and what this house is looking like were very similar. I was sort of, getting an idea that that's it. And I think maybe I actually saw you out on the porch as I was driving through. So.
Okay. Yeah, I probably was out on the porch.
That's on my way. We were on our way to Manhattan this morning. So,
I've been framing some of my better prints and putting them up on the wall in the house.
Do you get I know the last time I had artwork framed, they had glass that blocks the UV. Are you getting that?
I put in these, most of them, I think are fairly dark, where I have the blinds always pulled
Yeah,
down.
yeah. I don't know, there's a place in Manhattan that I take
I do my own
do your
framing.
yeah, no, these, and I thought about that when we were talking about framing on this, you know, there are these UV blocking glasses and things that some of the prints that we've had done are pretty nice.
I've got a mat cutting setup, so I can cut mats up to like 32 inches. Which, and then I've been learning the techniques of archival mounting.
Okay. Very interesting. Yeah. Well. Finished about on time. They asked us for, so. Is that, the big?
Oh yeah, that was the one you were talking about, the planisphere.
Yep. Patrick Moore's giant planisphere.
Yeah.
I've got a book that has a folded planisphere in the back that you would have to you'd have to cut it out and mount it to like a piece of wood or something, that it's like 3 feet across. But I'm not going to cut it apart, but I'm planning it is at some place. Take a photograph of it, and then get it printed, and then take that copy, cut it out, and mount it.
Yeah. So, again, if anybody, wants to give a presentation next month, you know, there's always time available. So just let me know. Otherwise, I hope to see you all here next month, and I don't know what we'll talk about, but we'll definitely do something. So don't forget about the open house